All right, welcome in. It is the Breer Report for April the 17th. We are now 1 week away from the NFL Draft. And so, as usual, here on a Thursday morning, we want to get to your questions, give you some answers, and also remind you that you can go to the mmqb.com where we answered a ton more of your questions. I try my best to keep those questions separate from the 3 questions that I'll answer here. So I give you guys a little bit of a different feel for the video mailbag and the print mailbag. But again, there's a lot more questions to a lot more answers, a lot more team specific stuff too that you can dig into on our print mailbag on the mmqb.com. So let's get going. We can start with a question from Bueller. That's at Boyle and Herbie. How many, if any, will we see first-round picks traded before or during the draft? Are teams reluctant to give up that fifth year of control, or maybe not seeing the value of future picks that they thought they would receive? Thank you. Thank you for the question, Bueller. As I see this right now, I think more of the lack of trades coming at the top of the draft are about the way that the board sets up for most teams and logistically what we're looking at. The first piece of this is at the very top of the draft trades that happen before the draft, usually they involve quarterbacks. And generally, if you get outside the first couple of picks, those picks are not traded before the draft. The reason why, you don't know exactly how things are going to play out. So you'll create contingencies and come to agreed deals if certain scenarios play out. So those sorts of phone calls will happen next week where teams might set up like, hey, if our guy is there at 5, at 6, at 7, we may be willing to come up and make a deal with you. So the logistics of those things generally are done ahead of time, but the trades aren't pushed over the goal line because, again, you don't know what's going to happen. If there are picks traded before the draft, those, again, outside of the top 2 or 3 picks, generally those are trades that happen a year ahead of time. So I don't anticipate the second or third picks being traded. For one, because there's no quarterback, I think, that's going to prompt a move up. You have Cam Ward going first overall. Tennessee needs a quarterback, so that pick's not being traded. And then at 2 and 3, again, like I don't know that teams value Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart or anybody else in this quarterback draft class worthy of going up for. I get the question after that would be whether or not teams look at Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter in that sort of way. And I don't know if that sort of trade is going to happen either, but for a different reason. I think the reason why, if you look at where the Giants are, where the Browns are at 3 and 2, is because if they're trading down to 5 or 6 or 7, that could be the equivalent of trading down to 15 or 20 a year ago. So it feels to me at least like the chalk is probably going to be what plays out here. Again, if you want Travis Hunter, are you going to have to pay a quarterback premium to go up and get him? And not because it's the second pick, but because if you're picking 5th or 6th or 7th, if the Browns value that like they would the 15th or 20th pick, they're going to be looking for that sort of return. And a team may not be willing to go up and give that sort of return for a player who's not a quarterback. So, I'd say you look at 2 in all likelihood, Travis Hunter to the Browns. 3, the Giants with Abdul Carter. There are certainly some questions on Carter, some character questions that I don't think are killers. I think just kind of how he's come off a little bit, but I think that stuff is fine for the most part. Then the bigger question with Carter would be the medical question, which is an important one here. He has shoulder and foot injuries that he's dealt with over the last year. He doesn't need surgery on either of those, but they are things that he may need to have repaired down the line. And then there's the factor of his lean body mass, which is low. That can be a predictor for injuries, which is a problem for some teams. Again, I think the likelihood is that the chalk plays out here. You have Hunter going 2, you have Carter going 3, and then you get to the 4th overall pick, and the question becomes with a New England at 4, a Jacksonville at 5, a Vegas at 6, what is somebody coming up for? Because again, if you look at the guy who goes 4th or 5th or 6th as maybe the 15th or the 20th pick in another draft, teams may not be motivated to go up and get that guy. And I think there is a clump of guys there where the difference between 4 and 14 or 5 and 20 might not be very different. So I just don't see what the motivator is going to be here for a team to jump up and give up a lot of capital and give up capital on day 2 of the draft, which might be the strength of this year's draft, where you can get starters in the 2nd, 3rd, and even into the 4th round. Like, I don't see teams giving up that capital to move up in a first round that isn't very strong. Now, where the movement could happen is once you get on the back half of the first round. So you get down to 15, to 16, to 17, to 18. You get into that sort of range now, and maybe the tackles are running low. Maybe the first tier of edge rushers are running low. And that's where I think you can see a move up. Corners. There aren't a lot of great corners in this year's draft. Does somebody move up for a corner? So I think when we get there into the middle of the first round, you could see teams move up. And then at the bottom of the first round, it could be for the quarterbacks. I think most teams have Pittsburgh there circled at 21 is when the quarterback market could start up again, particularly if none of the quarterbacks are picked between 1 and 21. So do you see some movement in that range? Could a team like the Rams at 26 be looking at a quarterback of the future? That could prompt some movement at the bottom of the first round. But I think as far as the top 10 picks, it wouldn't surprise me if that stays completely static on draft night. All right, question number 2. This is from Albert, nice name, at Albert G34. Albert asks, how surprised would you be with everything that you know and hear if the Raiders took Shedeur at 6? I would be pretty surprised. I'd be surprised if the Raiders took him at 6. I'd be surprised if the Jets took him at 7. I'd be surprised if the Saints took him at 9. I personally don't think that that's going to happen. So could the Giants take him at 3? Maybe. Would the Giants passing him on 3 lead to a fall? I think it would. And the next team you'd be looking at might be the Steelers at 21. So what does this mean for the Raiders? And specifically to your question, why wouldn't the Raiders consider a quarterback at 6? I think a huge part of it is maybe not valuing this class of quarterbacks this way. And I think it's one of the advantages they have in reworking their front office the way that they did. Back in the fall, there was a lot of noise out there that Mark Davis was going to mandate that his team go and get a quarterback, sort of like where the Colts were a couple of years ago. And that's how you make mistakes in the first round, when you feel like you're backed into a corner as a general manager or a coach where you have to take a quarterback in the first round. Sometimes there's not a quarterback that you value that way. Having Tom Brady in there and having Tom Brady empowering John Spytek and Pete Carroll at the ownership level, I think allows them to take a broader view with this pick. And I do think, like, based on where they are from a roster standpoint, they have a lot of needs to fill, and they just need to go in and take the best player. And what bringing Geno Smith in has done is it gives them a little bit of runway. I've made this comparison before. It's a little bit like Alex Smith in Kansas City. The Chiefs traded for him in Andy Reid's first year. That allowed them not to force it in 2013 when they had the first overall pick. They wind up taking Eric Fisher. That was the draft, if you remember, where E.J. Manuel was the only first-round quarterback. So obviously it was the right move then. Alex Smith gets them to the playoffs and in playoff contention consistently. In 4 of his 5 years as the starter, he is in the playoffs. And it gives them the chance to sit back and survey the quarterback market over years, not a single year, and then strike when they saw something special in Patrick Mahomes. That's what Geno Smith does for the Raiders. He gives them the chance to be patient with a known commodity in Geno as their quarterback. So I think the Raiders probably wind up taking a position player, whether it's Ashton Genty or a lineman. I think a lineman would be in play here. I mean, maybe an Armand Membu. I don't think Will Campbell makes it there, but maybe Will Campbell would be in play, maybe a Kelvin Banks, or somebody to help on their defensive line. My sense is, looking at the history of John Spytek in Tampa, looking at the history of Pete Carroll in Seattle, building up the lines of scrimmage makes sense. With, again, Ashton Genty, because of Pete Carroll's history of investing in running backs, also a possibility. Question number 3, this is from Zarelli. That's at Zarelli. Is Carr not fully transparent about his injury? What are teams' thoughts on quarterback 2 and quarterback 3 of the draft? Zarelli, the Derek Carr situation is definitely a strange one. The Saints weren't caught off guard. This is a 2-year-old injury that he has with his shoulder, and the question of whether or not he needs surgery. I think there's some skepticism in the Saints organization. If you want to roll back the clock and look at how all this went, you can go back to Kellen Moore's opening press conference, where I think support for Derek Carr was there, but it might not have been to the level that Derek Carr would have liked, where he declares Derek Carr the starter. Carr went and looked for a raise. Then there was some question of whether or not he was going to be traded. Did he put in a trade request ahead of the start of the league year? Then the Saints executed the conversion, converting his base salary into a signing bonus, which basically locked him in with the team. They did that, as is their right in the contract, unilaterally. They didn't really work with him on it. So there's been a lot of moving pieces in this saga, and it's clearly not over yet. So we'll see what happens. But obviously, this puts the Saints in a weird position at quarterback. They've got Spencer Rattler on the roster and not a whole lot else. So do they get in the Kirk Cousins mix? Do they take a swing on Aaron Rodgers? I don't think they're going to panic at quarterback, but one quarterback they've done a lot of work on, I mentioned this in the Breer Report the other day, was Jackson Dart. As for where teams are at with quarterback 2 and quarterback 3, I'd say there's a big range of outcomes here. There's a big range of outcomes here where I think Shedeur could go 3rd. I think he could go 33rd. I think Jackson Dart could go 9th. I think Jackson Dart could go in the 2nd round. I think Tyler Shuck could be the second quarterback to go. So while it feels like maybe in the public sphere, there's been this consensus that it's, Ward 1, Sanders 2, Jackson Dart 3. And then, we'll see after that. I don't think I don't think that there's an overwhelming consensus of that when it comes to how NFL teams look at this. I think there are a lot of different answers. If you asked a lot of different teams who's the second best quarterback and third best quarterback in this draft, which I think is going to add to the fun of next Thursday and Friday and seeing where all these guys go. Appreciate you guys coming out. Keep it locked on with everything that we're going to have coming to you over the course of the next week. We're going to be loaded with stuff. We got another podcast coming that I'm about to record with Connor. We'll have a couple more of those next week. We're going to have a ton of stuff up on the website. I'm going to have my annual needs column with some information on all 32 teams and what way they might be leaning. And, we will have a mock draft. I'm going to have what I'm hearing columns. All of that is coming for you. I'm going to have my quarterbacks column. That's coming for you too, with coaches' assessments on the quarterback class. Again, a ton of content coming. Keep it locked here. Happy Easter, everybody. And we will see you next week. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the different platforms, maybe we'll see you on the podcast a little later today.